What if I told you a sitting president started his morning praying peacefully in his private garden, completely unaware that just meters behind him, a trained assassin was silently aiming a gun at his head? What if that assassin wasn't a rebel, but a foreign spy wearing a gardener's uniform sent not just by one man, but backed by powerful international forces? This isn't a movie. This is the real-life story of an assassination attempt on Burkina Faso's President Ibrahim Traoré, and how that one moment revealed a much deeper conspiracy involving high-ranking traitors, secret alliances, and a plot that spans across West Africa. Today we're breaking down one of the most intense and high-stakes real-world stories in modern African politics, from betrayal inside the presidential palace to a spy from the US escaping custody, and a president who went undercover to unmask the very people he trusted. This is a thriller you won't believe actually happened. And this story is more than bullets and betrayals. It's about power, sovereignty, and a quiet revolution that terrified global players. The question is, why was one man such a threat that they were willing to send agents, poison his tea, and buy off his inner circle? And more importantly, did they succeed, or did he outplay them all? Before we dive into this explosive story, let me ask you something. Which country are you watching from? Let us know in the comments, because stories like this affect not just one nation, but an entire region, and maybe the world. When are you watching this video? Is it early morning like when the attack happened, or late at night when the palace was under lockdown? If this kind of content opens your eyes to what's really happening behind the headlines, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Click that red button below and make sure to turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming breakdowns of global events with real stakes. This is not just news. This is the inside story of how modern warfare isn't always fought on battlefields. It's fought in boardrooms, bunkers, and sometimes gardens. Let's begin. The morning light over Ouagadougou was soft, golden, and quiet. The city had not yet awakened. The streets were empty. Birds chirped gently in the distance, and a gentle breeze moved through the trees in the presidential compound. Everything appeared peaceful, almost sacred. And in the middle of that quiet morning, President Ibrahim Traoré knelt on the grass of his private garden, beginning his day in the only way he knew how, through prayer. He was alone. No bodyguards nearby, no cameras watching. Just a man and his faith, surrounded by flowers and trees. But someone else was there too, hidden behind the hedges, less than 30 feet away. A man dressed in a gardener's uniform, holding a silenced pistol with both hands. The gun was steady, the aim was perfect, and the target was unaware. This man was not a gardener. His name was Cain. He was an American, but not the kind that traveled with diplomats or wore suits. Cain was a field agent trained in psychological warfare, hand-to-hand combat, and tactical assassination. He had arrived in Burkina Faso using a fake passport and had been hiding inside the palace grounds for almost 48 hours. He waited, patient and focused. The silence of the garden was the perfect cover. For Cain, this was supposed to be clean, quiet, and fast. One shot, no noise, no resistance. The mission was to eliminate a threat that, in the eyes of foreign powers, had become too unpredictable, too powerful, and too independent. President Traoré had become a problem not just for neighboring governments but for those watching from afar. He had pushed French troops out, rejected foreign economic dependencies, and was building alliances with Russia and other emerging partners. His actions had won him admiration from the people, but fear from the old power structure. They didn't just want him gone. They wanted him erased without a trace, without a martyrdom, without a headline. Cain had received direct instructions. You'll enter disguised as staff. Wait until he's alone. Don't miss. Those were the words. The funding, the logistics, the intelligence, it all came from outside. Some from Côte d'Ivoire's highest offices. Others, allegedly, from Paris and even Washington. Cain didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. To him, this was just another job. But something strange happened. As he slowly tightened his finger on the trigger, Traoré, without turning, spoke. You've come a long way to die here, haven't you? Cain froze. The words didn't make sense. The president had his back turned, still kneeling, still praying gore, so it seemed. But somehow, he knew. Cain's training told him to act fast, shoot before things escalated, but instinct held him back. That hesitation cost him everything. In one motion, Traoré spun around, faster than Cain could react. A sharp kick sent the pistol flying. Then came a punch to the throat, a sweep to the legs, and within seconds Cain was face down, arms twisted behind his back, breathing in the grass he had planned to use as his final cover. Cain tried to fight back. He had been trained for this, but nothing prepared him for Traoré's combat style. It wasn't polished like Western techniques. It was raw, efficient, unpredictable. A fusion of Soviet combat arts, guerrilla tactics from the Sahel, and street fighting designed not just to defeat, but to dominate. Before he could scream, before he could reach for the backup knife in his boot, guards finally arrived, rushing across the garden with guns raised, but the fight was already over. President Traoré stood tall, not even breathing hard. He looked down at the captured man beneath him and said calmly, "Don't shoot. He's not just a killer. He's a message." The guards hesitated, confused, but they followed orders. Cain was bound, disarmed, and blindfolded. The mission had failed. Not because of poor planning, but because the man they were targeting wasn't just a politician. He was a soldier, a strategist, a survivor. Later that morning, deep beneath the presidential palace, in a bunker that even most staff didn't know existed, Daniel Cain was strapped to a metal chair in the center of a cold, windowless room. And when Traoré walked in alone, no guards, no guns, just a small cup of tea in his hand, the war between shadows truly began. The room was made of cold stone. No windows, no decoration, no sound except the slow drip of water from an unseen pipe. Daniel Cain sat in the center, his hands cuffed tightly behind the metal chair. Sweat rolled down his forehead. Despite all his training, something about this place, this silence, felt different. It wasn't fear of pain. It was the sense that for once, the enemy wasn't predictable. Then the door opened. President Traoré walked in without ceremony. No guards, no weapons, just holding a small porcelain cup of tea. He placed it gently on the table across from Cain and sat down. His eyes were calm, his voice level. "Let's talk." Cain didn't respond. He stared ahead, his face blank. But Traoré wasn't playing a game. He leaned in. "Where are you from?" Cain smirked. "You already know." "Say it anyway," Traoré said firmly. "On record." A pause. Then Cain spoke the words. "Langley. I work for the agency. And yes, I was sent here. Washington knows, but the green light came from Abidjan. Ouattara himself approved it." The words hung heavy in the air. Traoré didn't blink. He simply nodded, stood up, and began pacing slowly. "Why would Côte d'Ivoire want me dead?" he asked, more to himself than to Cain. Cain shrugged. "You pushed too far, kicked out the French, cut ties with Paris, welcomed Russia, even Iran. You didn't just challenge the West, you made them look weak. And worse, you made yourself popular. That's the real problem." He leaned forward. "You were never supposed to last this long." Traoré sat back down. "And yet here I am." Cain chuckled. "For now." Then his tone shifted. He looked the president in the eye. "You think I'm the only one? Half the people around you are smiling to your face while reporting behind your back. Someone gave me the gate code. Someone inside this palace. And they're planning the next attempt tonight." The words were like ice in the air. Traoré didn't react, but his mind was already racing. He had known there were whispers, suspicions, but this was confirmation. A traitor was close. Perhaps even within his security circle. But instead of panicking, he made a decision. Quiet and cold. Later that night, the presidential palace looked as calm as always. Guards at every post, lights on in every hallway, curtains drawn. Everything appeared routine. But President Traoré was no longer in his room. He had changed into a soldier's uniform, no medals, no insignia. A plain jacket, a scarf covering his face, and a cap pulled low. Only 3 people in the palace knew his location. He wasn't hiding. He was hunting. Earlier that evening, after Cain's warning, Traoré had decided not to wait. "Let them think I'm asleep," he said. "Let them plan. I'll walk into their meeting and look them in the eye." At exactly 11:37 p.m., inside a small storage room beneath the palace kitchen, 7 men gathered. They spoke in low voices, checking their watches, whispering phrases like Phase 2 and Ivory Flame. One of them, a doctor in a white coat, read a short message from a tablet. "Backup team in place. The Americans say the poison will act slowly. He should be unconscious by morning." A young soldier among them, Lieutenant Bo, asked nervously, "What if he finds out?" The doctor smiled. "He won't. He probably already drank it." But they were wrong. Behind the wall, President Traoré was listening. He had planted a small microphone in the room earlier, but he wanted more than audio, he wanted faces. So now he stood in silence, waiting for the final proof. Then he pushed the door open. The men froze. In his disguise, they didn't recognize him at first, but when he spoke, his voice cut through the room like a blade. "You talk like men," he said, "but you plot like rats." One of them reached for his gun, but Traoré already had his out. "Move, and I end this meeting myself." The doctor trembled. How did you?" "You poisoned my tea," Traoré said. "But I never drank it. You sent an American assassin. He talked, and now you plan to light your ivory flame? Then let me be the first to pour water on it." Just then, the door behind him burst open. Traoré's elite force, the Red Lions, stormed in. Within seconds, all 7 conspirators were subdued, disarmed, and restrained. The room fell into silence, except for the heavy breathing of betrayal. But as the last man was dragged out, the doctor leaned close to Traoré and whispered, "You stopped the spy, but you missed the snake." Traoré narrowed his eyes. "Who?" The doctor smiled faintly. "He's higher than me, close to you, and he's already moving." Traoré stood still, calm on the outside, but inside, alarms were screaming. This wasn't over, not even close. The real threat was still in the shadows. The next morning in Ouagadougou felt heavy, as if the city itself sensed something wasn't right. The skies were cloudy, and the presidential palace was no longer calm, it was on high alert. Guards rotated every 2 hours, entrances were sealed, conversations were short, suspicious. No one knew who to trust. President Traoré sat silently in his office, staring at 7 photographs on his desk. Each photo showed a man arrested the night before: soldiers, government aides, even the palace doctor, all traitors. And yet, something was missing. The real leader, Traoré told his intelligence chief, is still free. Someone close to me. Someone I trust. The officer nodded grimly. A snake in your shadow. Just then, a message arrived officially from the U.S. Embassy. The language was cold, impersonal. It claimed the agent, Daniel Cain, acted without authorization and requested a private meeting to resolve misunderstandings. But something was off. The wording didn't match diplomatic norms. The font looked strange. Traoré raised an eyebrow. "Is it real?" he asked. His cyber team confirmed. The communication channel was real, but the signal had not originated from American servers. It came from a private military network inside Côte d'Ivoire. That's when it became clear. This was a cover-up. Someone was trying to erase the trail, starting with him. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the palace, a man in a general's uniform walked with ease and authority. Every guard he passed saluted. He was General Yakuba Dio, a veteran of 3 presidencies, a legend in the army. Traoré had once called him the backbone of national defense. But behind the calm exterior, Dio was hiding a secret that could bring down the entire regime. At exactly 10:15 a.m., Dio entered a restricted communications room near the palace's underground command center. He closed the door behind him, took out a metallic box disguised as medical equipment, and activated a satellite uplink. The device blinked red as it connected. Then, He typed a short message. All targets exposed. Only Traoré remains. Awaiting green light. He hit send. But something was wrong. The device beeped strangely. A red light flashed twice. Then a voice came from the speaker. Calm. Cold. You're sending too late, General. He already knows. Dio's face turned pale. He spun around. Standing in the doorway, framed by the flickering hallway light, was President Traoré. We found your signal days ago, Traoré said, stepping inside. We listened to your calls, tracked your routes. Even the Americans underestimated how deep you'd go. Dio reached for his weapon, but he never made it. A Red Lion operative crashed through a side window and pinned him against the wall. Dio struggled but was quickly overpowered. Traoré approached him slowly, eyes locked on the man he had once trusted more than anyone in uniform. You trained thousands of our soldiers, Traoré said, but loyalty can't be taught. How much did they pay you? Dio didn't flinch. He gave a weak smile. It wasn't money. It was fear. They told me that if I didn't help, this country would burn. Traoré looked at him with disgust. Then let them come with fire. We'll answer with thunder. As Dio was escorted out in cuffs, Traoré turned to his inner circle. Prepare the airbase, he said. We're going to the border. Hours later, the sun blazed over the Sahel as a black SUV with no official markings raced south. Inside sat Traoré, dressed plainly, flanked only by 4 loyal Red Lions. Their destination, the Burkina Faso, Côte d'Ivoire border. But this wasn't a war mission, it was a warning. The journey south was tense but silent. The black SUV moved through dry Sahel terrain, dust trailing behind. Inside, President Traoré sat with eyes fixed forward, speaking little. Every minute that passed brought him closer to the heart of the storm. This wasn't a diplomatic visit, and it wasn't war. It was something in between, with confrontation with the source of betrayal, carried out face to face. 3 hours after departure, the vehicle arrived at an abandoned customs checkpoint near the Burkina Faso-Côte d'Ivoire border. There, waiting in the heat, were 2 armored vehicles and half a dozen Ivorian soldiers. At their center stood General Kawasi, a high-ranking officer directly under President Alassane Ouattara. His expression was hard. No salute. No handshake. This is not your land, President, Kawasi said coldly. You come here without notice. That can be considered an act of aggression. Traoré didn't respond with emotion. He stepped forward and calmly laid a brown folder on a rusted table between them. Kawasi opened it. Inside were satellite images of a covert training camp in Côte d'Ivoire, audio recordings of intercepted communications involving Daniel Cain, and a list of flight manifests for mercenaries flown in from Senegal. Traoré stood silently as Kawasi scanned the files. When he was done, Kawasi gave a dry laugh. You still don't get it, do you? Traoré's eyes narrowed. Then explain it to me. Kawasi leaned in. Ouattara isn't acting alone. What's happening here isn't just about you. It's about an entire region being redrawn. He paused, then continued. You threw out the French. You rejected the CFA franc. You called out the hypocrisy of the West. That made you dangerous. Not because you had weapons, but because people listened to you. You became a symbol. Kawasi's voice dropped lower. Symbols are harder to kill than men. Traoré stayed silent, absorbing the weight of the truth. Then came the twist. Kawasi leaned closer and asked, Do you know where Daniel Cain is now? Traoré replied, In a bunker. Under my watch. Kawasi shook his head. He escaped. Last night. With help from inside your government. Back in Ouagadougou, alarms were already sounding. The captured American agent had vanished. Guards found 2 staff members drugged in the basement. The palace's surveillance system had been cut exactly 6 minutes of black screen. No camera recorded who released him. But they did find something else. In Traoré's private war room, a note had been left behind. You can stop the foot soldiers, but the generals are already bought. At the border, Traoré's phone buzzed. It was his intelligence chief, voice trembling. "Sir, Cain is gone. Someone helped him escape." Traoré didn't blink. He looked directly at Kawasi and said, "Then I stop playing chess. From now on we fight face to face." He turned and walked back toward the SUV, but paused before stepping in. "Tell Ouattara this. I'm not afraid of shadows. I'm the storm that walks in daylight." And with that, he crossed back into Burkina Faso. But deep inside, he knew the real battle had only just begun. The enemy wasn't just outside the walls, it was inside his own halls of power. 2 days had passed since President Traoré's return from the border. The palace was no longer a place of routine. It had transformed into a war zone without bullets where the battle was not fought with guns but with silence, suspicion, and surveillance. Guards were rotated constantly. Rooms were searched at random, and every minister, aide, and officer was under quiet observation. But despite these efforts, one fact remained painfully clear. Daniel Cain was gone. No footprints, no digital trail, no satellite image. It was as if the American spy had vanished into thin air. For Traoré, there was only one explanation: Cain hadn't left the country. He was still here, being protected, hidden by someone with access and influence, and that someone was close. Traoré did not call for a meeting. He did not announce a manhunt. He did not trust the normal chain of command. Instead, he launched a secret operation known only to his most loyal unit, the Red Lions. The mission was simple in theory, but deadly in practice. Track every whisper, every irregular pattern, every late-night movement. Watch everyone. Trust no one. The operation was codenamed Operation Tiger. For 3 nights, the Red Lions worked in silence. They planted bugs in offices. They tapped encrypted lines. They followed unmarked cars after midnight. They didn't make arrests. They listened, recorded, watched, and slowly a pattern began to form. One name kept appearing in hushed conversations, in coded messages, and in suspicious route logs: Colonel Hamidou Sangaré, Minister of Defense. Sangaré was a national hero, decorated in the Sahel conflicts, calm, professional, respected by all ranks. He was one of the few men personally promoted by Traoré after the revolution. A quiet man. Too quiet. On the 4th night, just after 2 a.m., a Red Lion agent followed Sangaré's car leaving the presidential complex. It didn't go home. It didn't go to the defense ministry. It drove to an old colonial mansion on the edge of the city, long believed to be abandoned. There were no lights outside, but inside, behind a cracked window, the agent saw something that made the blood run cold: Daniel Cain, alive, unshaven, sipping tea calmly at the same table as Sangaré. The spy had never left. He had been protected by one of the highest-ranking men in the country. Traoré received the intel at 2:04 a.m. He did not blink. He did not speak. He simply gave one command. "We move at 3, no noise. No shots unless I give the word." At exactly 2:57 a.m., 3 unmarked SUVs surrounded the mansion. The Red Lions moved like shadows, disabling alarms, breaching entry points, spreading out. Traoré was with them not as a president, but as a hunter. Inside, Cain was picking up his phone when the power cut out. The lights flickered and died. In the sudden darkness, he turned just as a flashlight beam hit his face. Standing across the room, gun drawn, was Traoré. "You didn't think I'd find you this fast, did you?" he asked. Cain said nothing. He looked to Sangaré, who was already being handcuffed by 2 Red Lions. The general didn't resist. He didn't speak. He only whispered to Traoré, "They promised peace." Traoré stepped closer. "Peace doesn't come through betrayal. You gave them our coordinates. You let them in. You almost sold our country for a promise." Cain finally broke his silence. "You're smart, Traoré. But this won't end with me. There are others outside and inside. You're just slowing down what's already coming." Traoré leaned in, his voice low and sharp. "Then I'll slow it down with fire, and bury it before it reaches our soil." As Cain and Sangaré were dragged away, the Red Lions swept the building. In the study, they found documents, maps, and a device used to mask satellite signals. But one item stood out: a printed map showing military installations across Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, and Ghana. At the top corner, the logo of a private American security firm. At the bottom, the words Phase 3, Regional Stabilization. Traoré stared at the map for a long time. Then he turned to his communications chief and said, "Call Mali and Niger, tonight." Because now, he understood this was never just about him, it was about the future of West Africa. The war had changed. No longer hidden in gardens or whispered behind locked doors, it had moved into the open, onto maps, into documents, and across borders. President Traoré knew that what once seemed like a personal assassination plot was only the first phase of something much larger: a coordinated attempt to destabilize and control the entire West African region through covert operations, internal sabotage, and foreign-backed military influence. That same night, inside a heavily fortified room beneath the presidential palace, Traoré stood at the head of a long steel table. Around him sat two senior military representatives, one from Mali, one from Niger. For the first time in recent memory, the three countries were united not by diplomacy or trade, but by shared survival. On the table was the map recovered from Sangaré's hideout. Red pins marked military bases, telecom hubs, gold mines, and intelligence posts stretching across 4 nations. Intercepted data revealed coordinated surveillance efforts by private military firms and intelligence contractors, many connected to interests in Washington, Paris, and beyond. These weren't just business operations. They were instruments of control. "This is not about one nation," Traoré said, his voice steady. "It's about the entire region. They are redrawing our borders without war, conquering our governments without guns, and dividing our people with false alliances. This must end." He then proposed what would later be known as Operation Dignitia joint initiative between Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, aimed at reclaiming control over the region's sovereignty and rooting out foreign influence from critical infrastructure. The mission had 3 objectives. 1. Seize and dismantle foreign spy installations operating under the guise of communications towers, or NGOs. 2. Freeze offshore accounts linked to political corruption, bribery, and foreign funding used to manipulate elections or military decisions. 3. Expose and remove private military companies embedded in regional security forces that answer to external powers. All 3 leaders agreed. By sunrise, coordinated teams were already moving. Across capitals and border towns, intelligence units raided diplomatic offices, seized encrypted devices, and detained key operatives posing as advisors. In Niger, 2 communications towers were found transmitting classified data to a European server. In Mali, a foreign security firm was caught training local units without official clearance. In Burkina Faso, more names surfaced, some within the military, others from international aid groups. But this wasn't just about seizing buildings or blocking accounts. It was about reclaiming dignity. Meanwhile, back beneath the palace, Daniel Cain remained in a maximum security cell. His face was no longer smug. He wasn't smiling. He sat quietly, knowing the net was closing around the network he had helped build. Traoré entered the cell again, alone. Cain looked up. "Back again?" "For the last time," Traoré replied. He dropped a file onto the table. Inside were photographs, audio transcripts, and field reports linking Cain to at least 5 failed coups across Africa, including Liberia, Guinea, and Chad. "This was never about Burkina Faso," Traoré said. "You came to test something here, a method, a strategy, but you made one mistake. You underestimated the people." Cain glanced at the file, then back at the president. "It was never personal." "It is now," Traoré replied. "You infiltrated my country, tried to end my life, bribed my people, and still here I stand." He paused, then added, "Because I'm not your puppet, and my country will never bow." Just then, a screen on the wall flickered to life. Across Africa, news networks were broadcasting live. Traoré stepped to the camera. "To every African watching," he began, "we are done being ruled from afar. done being manipulated, done being pieces on someone else's board. Today, we take back what is our sour land, our voice, our future. In villages and cities across the region, people cheered. Flags were raised, soldiers saluted, elders wept. But in a quiet office far away, a man in a gray suit picked up a phone and said, "He made it through. Cancel the operation. We'll find another way." The speech had ignited something far greater than applause. Across West Africa, Traoré's declaration echoed through homes, camps, military bases, and even among opposition leaders. For some, it was a call to hope. For others, a signal of disruption. But for Traoré himself, it marked the beginning of a deeper storm, because even after the dismantling of foreign operations and the arrests of key traitors, one truth remained. Cain had been captured, but not silenced. And worse, not all of his words had been lies. One haunting phrase stuck in Traoré's mind: "You stopped the spy, but you missed the snake." Operation Dignity had exposed much, but it had not uncovered the second Maletha one Daniel claimed was higher than the minister, someone embedded closer to the president than anyone had guessed. Someone powerful enough to arrange Cain's escape, someone whose betrayal had not yet been written into any report. So Traoré remained silent. He said nothing to his cabinet. He released no new orders. Instead, he doubled down on Operation Tigre, launching the mission, this time with even tighter secrecy. Only 5 Red Lions knew the targets. No digital communication. No paper trail. For 3 nights, the capital was still on the surface, but underneath, a silent hunt unfolded. The surveillance team monitored dozens of high-ranking officials, private phone calls, late-night movements, anonymous emails, code words and reports. Most showed nothing. But one name emerged again, this time not from external chatter, but from within Cain's old contacts. General Yakuba Dio's former intelligence aide, Colonel Yassine Drabo. Drabo was quiet, efficient, and seemingly loyal. He had even helped interrogate Cain in the early days. But a recently decrypted file embedded in Cain's watch tracker revealed a GPS route leading to an abandoned army outpost near the city outskirts. Cross-referenced logs showed Drabo had accessed that zone alone twice in the last 10 days. It was enough. On the 4th night, Traoré ordered a low-visibility raid. No lights, no sirens. The team moved at 3:11 a.m. Inside the outpost, they found weapons, encrypted sat links, and WRC direct uplink to a secure European military relay satellite. Someone was reporting real-time intelligence. But Drabo was gone. What they did find, however, was more telling than any arrest. A hard drive. On it, intercepted footage of Traoré's private movements inside the palace. Surveillance not from Burkina's own systems, but from embedded micro-drones. Someone had eyes on the president inside his personal residence. Traoré stared at the feed in disbelief. He's watching me. In my own home. The implications were terrifying. The mole wasn't just close to him. He was inside the palace security grid. Within hours, the Red Lions purged the entire surveillance system. All internal feeds were cut and reinstalled using independent encryption. Access levels were reset. But Traoré knew. The deeper this went, the more likely the final traitor wasn't a spy. It was someone he had promoted. Someone who had seen him pray. Someone who had already tried once and was still waiting. The tension inside the presidential palace was like a coiled, spring-tight, silent, and seconds from snapping. Everyone moved with care. Even seasoned officers lowered their voices. Traoré had not spoken to the press. He had not appeared in public. His daily movements had been reduced to irregular patterns, improvised routes, and unexpected room changes. The goal was simple. Become unpredictable. Because someone was still watching. Someone was still waiting. The Red Lions doubled their surveillance, but Traoré knew. No security system could guarantee protection from betrayal that came wearing a uniform, offering a salute, or pouring his morning tea. That was the lesson from Cain. That was the meaning of the snake. Then came the night. It was quiet, eerily so. A cloud-covered sky muted the moonlight. Most of the palace lights were off. Guards stood post, but everything seemed unusually calm. Too calm. At exactly 1:14 a.m., a power fluctuation struck the West Wing. Lights blinked, cameras reset. Just 11 seconds, barely noticeable. But for a trained infiltrator, 11 seconds was enough. Inside the private residential corridor, a figure moved silently, dressed as a red lion. Same boots, same gear, same ID tag, but not one of them. In his hand, a compact pistol with a suppressor. In his ear, silence. No backup. No confirmation. He didn't need one. The plan was simple and bullet, one exit, one cover story. He reached the president's door, slowly turned the handle. No resistance. He stepped in, and found nothing. The bed was empty. The room was cold. On the pillow, a note. "You were late." The man froze. Then came a voice from behind. "You picked the wrong night." Before he could turn, the attacker was slammed to the floor. The lights came on. 4 red lions pinned him down. The imposter struggled briefly, then stopped. He said nothing. Traoré entered the room, dressed in plain fatigues. He looked at the man, young, early 30s, clean-shaven, eyes trained but not scared. "Who sent you?" Traoré asked. No reply. Was it Ouattara? Or someone here? Still silence. Traoré knelt. "I already know who you are. I'm just giving you a chance to speak your name before history records it for you." The man looked away. Traoré nodded once. "Take him to Isolation 9. But as the man was dragged away, he finally spoke one sentence that sent ice through the room. "You stopped me, but not the one behind me." For a moment, no one moved. Then Traoré turned to his commander. "Double the inner circle sweep. Interrogate everyone assigned to tea service, food, laundry, and bedroom access for the last 72 hours. The message was clear. This was not the last attempt. It was a signal. And that signal had been sent from inside. By the next evening, the palace was no longer just a place of government. It had become a fortress. Every hallway had been swept, every electronic device re-encrypted. Traoré's trusted cyber team uncovered a second layer of surveillance hidden, not in cameras, but in palace utility systems, lighting circuits, air vents, even water pressure monitors. Someone had gone deep, embedding monitoring tools in places no one thought to look. The implication was terrifying. This wasn't just espionage, it was occupation by code. But even more chilling, someone had access to it from inside the state's own data center. That narrowed the suspects to a handful of elite-level technicians and intelligence officers. The inner circle shrank again. Traoré's face remained calm, but every movement now carried weight. Every word he spoke, every room he entered was calculated. He slept in a different location each night, one time in the barracks, another time in an old archive room. No one, not even his personal assistant, knew his next step. Then came the signal. At 11:49 p.m., a Red Lion patrol intercepted an outgoing signal bouncing off a non-military tower just 2 kilometers from the palace. It was encrypted, high frequency, piggybacking on a water supply maintenance system. The signal was brief, just 4 words. Phase 4, midnight confirmed. Traoré was alerted immediately. He didn't panic. He didn't call a meeting. Instead, he walked silently into the strategy bunker, picked up the red phone, and issued one sentence. "Activate protocol dust." It was a last resort directive, a simulation of evacuation, chaos, and exposure designed to flush out hidden operators. Alarms were triggered. Fake orders were broadcast through secure channels. Decoy convoys left the palace in multiple directions. And then they waited. Within 30 minutes, 2 unmarked vehicles attempted to leave the city from a restricted southern checkpoint. Inside one, a diplomatic pass. Inside the other, an unconscious man stuffed inside a military supply container. He was alive, sedated, and wearing a civilian mask. It was Colonel Yassine Drabo, the same man who had disappeared during Operation Tiger, the man with access to data centers, the man Cain had trusted. He was trying to flee. At 12:31 a.m., Drabo was in custody. His phone contained deleted conversations with a foreign number traced to a private intelligence firm based in Brussels. His last sent message was chilling. They still don't know who the real one is. When Traoré read it, he understood. Drabo was not the snake. He was the decoy. The snake, the final traitor, was still free. The morning after Drabo's failed escape was still and strange. The air in Ouagadougou felt heavy thick with humidity, but also with realization. Inside the war room beneath the presidential palace, President Ibrahim Traoré stood in silence, hands clasped behind his back, staring at a giant digital map of West Africa. The final message on Drabo's phone echoed in his thoughts. They still don't know who the real one is. That meant one thing: the final traitor was not hiding in the shadows anymore. He was moving in daylight. Possibly in uniform. Possibly inside that very building. And if he wasn't stopped, everything Traoré had protected would fall. But then came the message that changed everything. An encrypted data burst came through a private channel sent from an anonymous location within Burkina Faso's northern region. It contained one video, less than 15 seconds. In it, Daniel Cain was speaking. He wasn't in a cell. He wasn't even in the country anymore. I said it before, Cain whispered into the lens. You can stop me, but the engine is already running. Burkina was the test. The real game is the map. Then it cut off. Traoré stared at the screen, face unreadable. The red lion scrambled to trace the signal, but it vanished into the desert air. The video had been scheduled, not live. Cain was long gone. And worse, it confirmed the truth. The plan had always been bigger. He had been the distraction. The real objective was to set fires in every direction so no one would know where to look. But Traoré knew. He turned to his intelligence chief and said, "Call Mali. Call Niger. Call Guinea. Tell them it's time." That evening, leaders from all 4 nations arrived under maximum security. No cameras, no press. Just one room, one agenda. Defense of sovereignty, not with speeches, but with action. On the table was the map Cain had referenced. It had been reconstructed by analysts using captured intel from multiple raids. Dozens of red marks showed infiltration points, gold mines, ports, telecom stations, airports, and local governments. Each one was linked to private military firms, shell corporations, or diplomatic cover identities. Traoré stood before them and said, "They tried to control our land with weapons, then with money, then with fear. But now they try with silence. They want us to look away while they redraw Africa in their image." He pointed to the map. "We don't stop this by hiding. We stop it by speaking, by showing the people what's been done in their name, behind their backs." And then he gave the order that would make history. Operation Echo. Over the next 72 hours, joint teams across the region launched simultaneous public disclosures. Hacked emails, recorded bribes, secret facility locations, evidence of interference from foreign contractors and governments. For the first time, the people of West Africa saw the invisible war being fought around them. Crowds took to the streets not in protest, but in defense. Flags were raised, schools hosted emergency forums, soldiers who had once taken silent bribes now openly renounced foreign payments. A continent began to stir. The message was clear. We are awake. And Traoré, standing before the world, closed the chapter with the words that would echo beyond borders. You wanted silence. You built it with money, agents, and fear. But we broke it with unity, truth, and fire. And now, we are no longer the hunted. We are the storm. This is more than just a story of politics, power, or spies. It's the story of a leader who refused to kneel, of a nation that chose truth over fear, and of a continent beginning to awaken after years of silence. But the war isn't over. The maps are still being drawn. The hands behind the curtains are still moving. So now we turn to you. What do you think about President Traoré's fight? Do you believe Africa is on the edge of a new era at the center of a larger game? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this story powerful, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. This is not just content, it's a movement, and you're now part of it. Stay sharp, stay loud, stay free.